How's it going so far? Everybody okay? All right. I feel Bill just, I think, went to the restroom. I feel like I can't do anything with my face anymore. I can't do anything with my hands anymore. I'm totally confused now. I want to talk today about our theme, and that is difference makers and influential difference makers. I, like Ashley's talk earlier, not necessarily about airplanes, although we will talk a little bit about aviation here over the next little bit. But it's something that I enjoy reading about, researching, Googling, wikiing, call it what you want. I am not an expert by any means, but I do not own any of this apart from some of the opinions that I've attached to this. This is all information that is available to anybody, and if you have a passion for this. And so I want to highlight some of the stories, some of the people that, as I've grown up, as a Brit, you'll hear a lot about the United Kingdom in the next half hour or so. Some of those people that have made a difference in one way or another. And we'll look at some traits of difference makers. Before we get started on the session, though, I want to thank the NKU. I want to thank the College of Informatics. This Digitorium is part of that college. If you don't know what informatics is, I have to refer to these notes because they've asked me to do something before I get into my talk. So the term informatics is a field of study that studies the practice of information processing and the engineering of information systems. I think that's what they told me. So the College of Informatics, our hosts here today, have asked me to conduct a poll, and the poll is looking at the use of 4 of the most widely used internet browsers out there. So here's some data that they gave me. This is data from June 2015, and it shows half a dozen or more web browsers and their distribution around the planet. Who uses Google Chrome in green, Firefox, Safari, etc., etc. Some interesting stuff. I'm glad that they shared that with us. So what they want from me is, by show of hands, and Tim is in the back, and he's going to take a very quick count, what of those 4 internet browsers that you use the most. So we'll start with Microsoft Explorer. So a show of hands, is that something that you use the most either on your PC at work or whatever machine you normally use, either at home? No one uses Explorer the majority of times. Tim with the FAA, Microsoft Explorer. I would have guessed that. My dig at the FAA's WebOps system. Anybody else? No? Tim, you got that one? What's next? Google Chrome, they wanted me to ask about. Google Chrome? Hands high so we can count, please. Tim, you got that? Okay, thank you. Firefox? Okay, and Safari, I think, is the last one. Okay, thank you. And thanks to NKU for allowing us to be here. I think it would be very easy for me to talk about inspirational difference makers and put pictures of people up on the screen. Mother Teresa, Richard Branson, it's a fine-looking young man. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, Nelson Mandela, King, Gandhi, Gaius Julius Caesar. But we all know what these people have done to make the world a better place and improve the lives of people in the world. It's obvious that in order to be a difference maker, you have to have your picture taken in black and white. But anyone can do that. So let's qualify what I mean by inspirational difference maker. All these folks have made or continue to make a contribution, a positive contribution to the lives of people around the world. Oh, probably all except this guy right here. And arguably, Julius here. Jay was a bit of a handful. Without doubt, Caesar was one of the greatest generals in the early Roman Empire. He was the first one, after all, to cross the Rhine and invade Germany. He was the first one to cross another body of water, which the Romans early on did not particularly like, in the English Channel, and invade Britannica, I guess, back then. Now the UK. He instituted the Julian calendar, something that we still use today. He instituted a mass of political reforms, ultimately, however, leading to his famous death on March the 15th, the Ides of March, 44 BC. I'm not sure if it actually looked quite as dramatic as that. But Caesar was pretty cool too. He single-handedly started a new fashion trend in togas. It is said that he was particular in his dress, for he wore his toga praetexta with fringes about the wrist and always had it girded about him, but rather loosely. And this is very true. If you look at Caesar, Julius Caesar, and you look at folks before him, they didn't wear their togas this way. He was a trend setter. No one has worn their toga praetexta quite like Julius before or since. But we all know these people and we know what they've done. So let's talk about some people you may not have heard of and let you know how they made my list of inspirational difference makers. I'd also like to break down, as I say, some of the traits that I think helps us understand who and why. I want to start with Sir Dave Brailsford. In 2003, Dave became the head of basically British cycling. And he did some pretty remarkable things at the time. Maybe not so remarkable now, but pretty remarkable at the time. He was all about his mantra of aggregation of marginal gains. He summed it up this way. The whole principle came from the idea that if you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike, and then you improve it by 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together. You graph that out. It's a PowerPoint, you have to have a graph. You graph that out, and this, over time, is what happens. What I'm not going to show here is what happens if you have marginal gains and make a 1% negative change over time. Then it goes the other way. So this is a good thing. In 2010, Dave Brailsford left British Cycling to become the new general manager of the Sky team, and more about that in a second. Matt Parker took over from Dave, and he took everything that Dave Brailsford had taught him and ramped it up a little bit. So, he told cyclists to constantly wash their hands to avoid getting sick during competitions. He told them, in the case of the Olympics, not to take the Olympic buses because of germs. For the same reason, they had to bring their favorite pillow from home rather than use the hotel or the athlete's village supplied pillows to optimize their sleep and focus intently on the golden hour. Now in cycling, Olympic cycling, not road cycling necessarily, but ones that are in the indoor, the velodromes, there is a golden hour. It's an hour between the semi-final and the final. And if you think, a lot of these are endurance events and a lot of these are sprint events. And you want to get in the final, so you're not going to hold back necessarily, unless you're Usain Bolt and you have a conversation with the guy running beside you. So you're not really going to hold back because you really want to get in the final. The final is where they dish out all the gongs, all the medals. So you would think that after a semi-final, 1 hour of rest, going into the final, you would be slower. I've just told you the answer, but hold that thought. They looked at how they changed tires. They looked at using an alcohol rub to rub away all of the dust on the rim of the wheel to improve aerodynamic efficiency. As a result, the British team won 8 gold medals in cycling out of a possible 18. It's almost half the gold medals available. 12 of the possible 55 medals on offer in cycling. 22%. In addition, every single cyclist who made it into a final after the golden hour cycled faster than they did in the semi-final. This year, this was an Olympic year. This year, the British team won 12 of the medals, gold medals up for grabs. There were 12. They won 6, exactly 50%. And 12 out of 54, again, 22%. Meanwhile, Dave Brailsford was over at Team Sky. A British cyclist had never won the Tour de France. Never won the Tour de France. So Dave did his aggregation of marginal gains thing again, and they took it another step further. So not only did they tell the athletes, always take your own pillow, they looked at which was the best pillow to take. That's going to be your pillow. So which pillow provided optimal sleep? Then take that one. They gained on everything. The ergonomics of the seat, the gel that they used to lessen friction. Everything. They looked at absolutely everything. They searched for 1% everywhere. Brailsford believed that they could execute this strategy pretty successfully. Team Sky, they said, Dave, you've got to win us the Tour de France in 5 years. They were wrong. In 2012, they won it in 3. Not all innovation, though, comes from taking small steps. The alternative approach involves taking on much more risk. Back in the 1930s, the British Air Ministry held a design competition for a single-seat monoplane fighter. Totally radical in those days. Because normally you'd have, back in the day, you'd have a pilot and a gunner. You've all seen some of these weird-looking pusher airplanes with the pilot and the gunner sits up front with a great field of view with his machine gun, biplane, stick, and bubble gum, keeping the whole thing in the air. There were many entries, and one was by a young designer called Mitchell. This is the Type 224, a beautiful-looking airplane. It was a bit of a dog, actually. The Air Ministry, not surprisingly, turned this down. But Mitchell continued to work on the concept. And on the 1st of December 1934, the Air Ministry's man, and I cannot make these names up, this is Air Commodore Henry Brown Cave, issued contract AM 36114-0-34, providing £10,000 for the construction of Mitchell's improved F-730 design. Brown Cave was quoted as saying this: "It's a most interesting experiment." So, to our eyes, the Type 224 just is ugly. It failed to win the bid. It looks like a winged brick. I mean, the width of those pants on the undercarriage is probably about 18 inches. So let's drill down on some of the specifics, though. First, the fact that it was a monoplane was quite revolutionary at the time. This is the 1930s. In fact, at the time of that Air Ministry bid, this was the top-of-the-line fighter airplane in the Royal Air Force's inventory. It's the Hawker Fury. I personally think it's like Concorde, an E-type Jag or something. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of design. But again, let's look at that. Open cockpit, biplane, 2 wings, wires, fabric, fixed gear. That was the pinnacle of aviation in the 30s. But in May 1931, when this entered service, it was on the cusp of being obsolete. Something, obviously, we don't have to deal with today at all. But the single wing of the 227 was unique in it had a single main spar, 4 of which were condensers for the engine forming the entire leading edge of the wing. Okay, so it was powered by the Rolls-Royce Goshawk engine, and it was evaporatively cooled. This involved allowing the cooling water to reach a temperature above 100 degrees C. It was kept under pressure. That pressure, the water, and it cycled around, and it was blown off in steam. The steam was cooled went by the condensers, and it just went all over the place. So basically, it was liquid cooled. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. But when you put this system in a fighter airplane that is designed to do something beyond straight and level, all that steam and water and all this kind of... I'm not an A&P. I know that, Ashley. You confirmed that again at dinner last night. All this stuff that's supposed to be kept separate when you turn the airplane upside down or whatever doesn't remain separate. And so the engine was totally unreliable. Experimental, you say. No, this was the very engine that powered the Hawker Fury in 1931. So Mitchell went back to the drawing board, literally. But he also went back to design that had been very successful to him. He, in 1925, designed a seaplane to compete in the Schneider Trophy races. Now, let's put that in perspective. 1925, 1933. So that's 33% step backwards in history over the entire history of powered flight to that time. 33% of the history of powered flight. So he's going back to a design that old. Now, we would never do that today. Looks good, lasts a long time. So that was designed in 1979. And we're still here. So the seaplane design he felt back home was a radical departure. The fuel tanks were in the floats rather than the wings. Large air-cooled cylinders or flat radiators were aerodynamic as a dump truck. And they were moved from the front of the airplane to the leading edge of the wings, the 224 type. The resulting design was this, the S4. That is slick. The S4 in 1925 actually crashed. Looked really good, but it flew a little bit too fast, and I think the cause, they say, was G-lock, loss of consciousness on the pilot's part. That year, a fella you may have heard of by the name of Jimmy Doolittle won the Schneider Trophy race. But they came back with subsequent designs, the 5, the 6, and the 6B. And they won for the next 3 years, and in fact, they won the Schneider Trophy outright. I've actually seen it for the longest time. It was at the Royal Air Force College Library at Cranwell, RAF Cranwell. So he did all right with this back in the 20s. So it was this airplane, the S6 in particular, that led to the design of what arguably is one of the most iconic aircraft designs ever, the Supermarine Spitfire. The young designer, of course, was Reginald Joseph Mitchell, or R.J. Mitchell. Mitchell wasn't known outside of aviation circles, during his lifetime, certainly. He was known for his kindness, his humanity, and he commanded unerring respect from the people that worked for him. Loyalty, affection, you name it. He was utterly devoted to his employees also. But in 1933, in the midst of this whole redesign project that led up to the Spitfire, he was diagnosed with rectal cancer. In August that year, a major operation left him with colostomy. And in fact, his colleagues never knew that he was suffering. He continued to work on the 224 project, which turned out to be the Spitfire, and a bomber, a Model 317 they call it. Looked very similar to, if you're familiar with the Lancaster, a 4-engine bomber. 1933, he's diagnosed with cancer. 1934, unusually for aircraft designers back then, he actually got his pilot's license. 1936, cancer was diagnosed again, and subsequently in early 1937, Mitchell gave up his work because he basically couldn't. But apparently he sat at his house and watched the Spitfire being tested. He showed enormous courage and refused to contemplate retirement. In fact, it should be remembered that the whole time Mitchell was designing the Spitfire, he knew he would probably never live to see it in action and to see it be part of the victory of the Battle of Britain in September 1940. Mitchell died at his home, Hazeldean, Southampton, on the 11th of June 1937, aged only 42. On May the 31st, 2016, Captain Danny Flanagan landed his Boeing 757 for the final time after 30 years working for the airline. And he left a legacy that is long remembered by those with whom he flew. And I'm talking about the passengers. Just like Bill talked about the Delta captain earlier on, Danny was the same kind of fellow. He epitomizes what it means to make a difference. During his tenure with United, he would arrive at the gate an hour earlier than required. He would chat with the passengers. He would get on the intercom there at the gate. He would tell them what was going on with the trip, if there were any delays, all that useful information, the same kind of thing that Bill was talking about earlier. He gave them all those snippets of information. When he had an unaccompanied minor on the airplane, he would make sure he got the phone number of the child's parents and call the parents and let them know the kid was okay. Here's what we're taking care of him. We're going to be landing at this time, etc. On every flight, he handed out about 50 business cards, handwritten. Everybody in first class and everybody in economy in the middle seat, because we all know what it's like to be in the middle seat. He gave away bottles of wine. During delays, he served coffee. For long delays, he went out and bought hamburgers or pizzas. He's even been known to take dogs from the hold on a layover and walk them around the ramp. Captain Danny was, of course, reimbursed by the company for all this expense. So, okay, it's easy to be generous when somebody else is paying for it, right? Well, I would argue no. All of these things take time and effort. It takes conscious effort to see things around you, have a think about it, and place yourself in the situation of the customer. Then he said, I like to treat my customers as if they were my family flying with me. I've got a blessed life with my wife and children. When I see people in wheelchairs, injured soldiers, and those who aren't as healthy as I am riding on our planes, I'm even more grateful that I'm able to do what I've always wanted to do, which is fly airplanes. Again, all these things take time and effort. But how much time and effort, really? How much time does it take to hand out 50 cards to passengers getting on the airplane? How much time does it take to brew the coffee in a galley and go wander around the gate and serve coffee? What would you do in a similar situation? Would you be on your phone, swiping through your Facebook, on Twitter, hashtag 2016 Seabass, having a great time? What a huge difference these small things made to the people that experienced those small things in the back of the airplane. So how can we be inspirational difference makers? We're not all Dave Brailsfords, we're not all Danny Flanagans, we're not all Julius Caesars. I don't even own a toga. But we can all be like them in our actions. Dave Bookbinder, great name, is Director of Evaluation Services with GBQ Consulting. He points to 5 personality traits that every difference maker exhibits. So let's go through these. Number one, they ask the right questions. Difference makers ask things like, why does this take so long? Why can't we? What if? Difference makers are not going to be satisfied with a that's the way we've always done it mentality. We have a phrase at Reynolds Jet we use quite often, and that's this. What are the 6 most expensive words in business? We've always done it that way. Settling for and getting used to the way things are is called habituation. Someone made that up, I don't know who. Now, in many ways, that's good. Learning a new aircraft type is a process of habituation. We start out totally overwhelmed by all the new switches, displays, MFD pages, all the new information we're having to process, on top of all the other data such as our weather environment, the ATC environment, etc., next gen, blah. But slowly our brain absorbs these new things, creating something that equates to more bandwidth in our ability, allowing us to think about all those dynamic things, right? Flying the airplane becomes just flying the airplane. Then you handle all this other stuff that goes wrong. We don't have to think about it. Number 2, they see how things work. Difference makers look at work in ways that others haven't. They recognize the importance of seeking to understand the work from the recipient's point of view. Dave Flanagan. This perspective allows them to better tailor their deliverables for the recipient. Paul Bennett is the Chief Creative Officer at IDEO. Several years ago, he was asked by a large healthcare provider in Minnesota to point out to them what their patient experience was. The first thing they did when they got together with all these bigwigs of this corporation, this healthcare provider, was show them a video, 6 minutes. Of that. Everybody in the room would, after 30 seconds, shifting in their chairs and scratching their heads and looking around. 6 minutes of ceiling tiles. Because when you're in hospital, you spend a lot of your time on your back, and that is all you see. That is your perspective. Now, out of that simple revelation, some little things took place, and they weren't systemic changes. They were just little things. For example, and this actually is a picture from the healthcare provider he went to. The nurses began decorating the tiles, and they applied a border around the top of the wall. This had an enormous effect on how the environment affected the patient. They did other things. Another example was wheeling people along in a gurney. They duct taped a bicycle mirror on the side of the bed. Because what happens? You're looking at ceiling tiles again. And the person, porter, the nurse, whoever, pushing you, has no face-to-face contact. But they could look at each other and have a conversation in the mirror. Huge improvement. Number 3, they have out-of-network conversations. Difference makers regularly talk to people outside their immediate network of friends and associates. They understand that their immediate networks have a high correlation with similar contacts who might look at issues through similar lenses or experiences. By going outside their network, difference makers will build on the ideas that result from this variety of perspectives. You're all part of this today. By attending CBAS, by attending this event, by attending other functions, MBAA, NATA, scheduled and dispatchers, etc., you network. One of the things that you benefit, one of the things you gain, is a different perspective. I work with other Part 135 operators. How we do things is relatively similar because we all have to abide by the 135 regulations. It's black and white. It says right there in our little 135 Bible, thou shalt. How we accomplish that may be totally different. I'm all for stealing the best bits of everybody else's program. The best bit, why? That's okay with me. Be careful, however, how you craft your networking in a way that avoids a negative response. Kevin Starr is the managing director of the Malago Foundation. He argues that pitch is dead, long live the conversation. His position is that for you to become more effective, or more importantly, your idea and passion, your need, if you want that to be heard, then you engage in someone. or with someone in a non-threatening relational conversation versus a hard sell or a pitch. He uses this example of attending a function and someone coming up to him and saw his name badge and, oh yeah, I need to talk to that person. Networking, I need to talk to that person. They were doing something great for people somewhere in the world. It was a wonderful thing. But his reaction was this: well, I admire your courage and your willingness to just rock up and do this. I love what you're trying to do in the world. You're a better person than I am. This isn't working. Please stop talking. I wonder if they have any of those little crab cakes left. It was if a golden retriever had placed her favorite tennis ball in front of a puppy and expected the puppy to be as enthusiastic as she was. Chances are the puppy's going to love the tennis ball, but it's going to take a while. Number 4, they improve things. Difference makers are always looking to develop new techniques and strategies to optimize processes or products. For a difference maker, there are always possibilities. Good enough is never good enough. I think this one's common sense, but I would also argue it's not easy to pull off. I will, however, suggest to you improvements on some iconic designs of everyday objects that, in my opinion, exemplify that good enough is never good enough. Feel free to disagree with me on these. Number 1, folding aviators. No? Aviators have been around, Ray-Bans, aviators have been around since 1920. It's news to me. Folding aviators are now classy, stylish, and convenient, right? Number 2, the zipper. I could watch that video for 40 minutes. This is Under Armour. Under Armour has redesigned something as ubiquitous as the zipper. The zipper's been around for 100 years, almost as long as Ray-Bans. Not only does it eliminate the need to fit that, you know what I'm talking about, that one little metal tab that's surrounded by a piece of ill-fitting material into that other metal thingy. I'm sure it has a technical name. But it's magnetic and can be used single-handedly. That's sharp. Why didn't I think of that? Number 3, the see-through highlighter. For all the OCD folks in the room, never again go off-piste or overshoot what you are highlighting. Does anybody else have a problem with that? Where you go up onto the line above? I hate that. Absolutely drives me mental. OCD, by the way, should of course be CDO because it's alphabetical. Number 4, slicky notes. Slicky notes. This may be the best. Okay. I really truly believe there is no sticky note better than the real 3M Post-it note, made just down the road in Cincinnati, Kentucky. Hands up who loves sticky notes, Post-it notes. Okay, do you buy Post-it or do you buy an off-brand? I buy Post-it. Who buys Post-it rather than off-brand? Yeah, majority of people. They're great. However, it's one-sided, because the glue is on the other side. The whole flipping the thing up and writing on the other side totally defeats the purpose, because over time, that, you know, it's great, a fantastic thing, not perfect. Good is good enough. So the result is this thing here. It's the world's first glue-free, double-sided, dry erase, reusable sticky notes. Static electricity. Put them on your fridge, walls. Fantastic. Number 5, they take ownership. Difference makers don't pass the buck or hold the belief that something is not my job. Difference makers get great pleasure from the sense of accomplishment. This feeling inspires them to take on even more difference-making endeavors. And the upward spiral, the 1%, aggregation of marginal gains, that continues. A CEO once said, I have more than 1,000 people in my head office. 900 can tell me something's gone wrong. 90 can tell me what's gone wrong. 9 can tell me why it went wrong. And 1 can actually fix it. One marker of difference makers is creativity, the desire to think differently. It's our tagline at Reynolds Jet. Take, for example, the web browser you use. Did you really think that I was asked to take a poll for NKU? There's good evidence that Firefox and Chrome users, all right, come on, hands up, let's fess up again. Firefox and Chrome users, hands up. Okay? Significantly outperform Internet Explorer and Safari users at work. This is research conducted by MIT, not Mann, MIT, quoting some good sources here. So, it's not a technical advantage. The 4 browser groups had similar typing speeds, similar technical know-how. So what was the difference? It was how you get the browser. Can anybody tell me the difference between the top 2 and the bottom 2? Say again? Dave is our IT guy at Reynolds Jet. You're spot on, sir. Well done. You buy a Windows-based machine, guess what you get? If you buy a Mac, guess what you get? So you have to think, is there something else out there that's better than this? You have to go, again, off-piste, you have to go and download the top 2. The bottom 2 come with the equipment. You've got to be resourceful. You've got to do a little bit more work. You have to be creative. You have to see something. You have to see the possibility of something. You have to see the possibility of something you've looked at 1,000,000 times before, with new eyes this time. A screenwriter, Bill, can't get the green light for a movie script for more than half a century. In every past version, the main character has been an evil queen. But then Jennifer Lee comes along, and she starts to question whether that makes sense. She rewrites the first act, reinvents the villain of the piece as a tortured hero. And you're all going to sing the most famous song. It's going to be in your head for the rest of the day. And Frozen is born, the most successful animated movie ever. So you probably won't find yourself in the Tour de France anytime soon. You probably won't have too many chances to take advantage of marginal gains. I would suggest that you probably do. You might not think so. You may never have to come up with a radical solution or new design for a fighter. But the concept of radical change may be useful. Small personal touches go an awfully long way. And looking at things differently and being creative are all part of what it takes to be inspirational. Thanks.